Yeah. I mean, I can still hear it. Woman submit is the way it's been kind of talked about in the church.
Welcome to Coffee with the Couple Cure, where we share practical tips for your relationship before you finish your first cup. Here's Jay and Lori Pyatt.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode on the Couple Cure YouTube channel and on Coffee with the Couple Cure podcast. My name is Jay.
And I'm Lori. Thanks for joining us today. Do you want to tell them what we're going to cover today?
Sure. Today we're going to be talking about that part of the Bible in Ephesians where it talks about submission.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of discussion on that sometimes is overlooked, and it has been used to kind of keep women from speaking out, from having a voice that they need, especially when they're living in a situation that's somewhat abusive.
Yeah. I mean, I can still hear it. Woman submit is the way it's been kind of talked about in the church. The funny thing, though, that I really didn't know up until a few years ago was that whole passage. I mean, if you go to, I think it's Ephesians 5, it's either 21 or 22, that wives submit to your husbands out of reverence for Christ or something like that, as is fitting into the Lord. I can't remember it exactly, but wives submit to your husbands. Right before that, so that's either verse 21 or 20, it says submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. Submit to one another. And then it goes into wives and husbands. This is what that's going to look like. Wives submit, husbands love.
Right.
If you look at those scriptures, that whole passage for the husbands and wives, you'll notice that there's twice as much instruction given to men. Some have said like 3 times as much given to men to help them love. I think that's because it's more difficult for guys to love. It's a little less natural for guys to learn how to love in a very caring, self-sacrificing, nurturing way for the woman.
Right.
I have heard it said, and I'm quoting from somebody, it was actually a feminist, I just can't remember who it was, but it was very interesting to hear her say this. It was on the scripture, and she said, no woman would have a hard time submitting to a man if he loved her as well as Christ loved the church.
Right. In that love part, it talks about things like loving your wife is loving yourself. Loving your wife in a way that is self-sacrificial to her. And so one of the things I tell the guys that I work with is Christ died that we might have relationship with the Father. His sacrifice was for our relationship to be repaired with God. Our sacrifice is repairing the relationship between us and our spouse. Christ did not die to fix this relationship. That's my job. For the guys, this is kind of hard to hear because that self-sacrifice is not easy to do, and they want to just continue getting what it is they want without having to give things up.
But the guys need to understand God's a resurrection kind of God.
Yes.
If you die, He will bring you to something even better. You know, the scripture is, humble yourselves, therefore, under God's mighty hand, that you may be lifted up, that He may lift you up in due time.
Right.
Try it. Try it. It's in there for a reason. That whole section also goes into children, obey, adult children, honor your parents. But here's the interesting thing, slaves and masters. Our therapist said, become slaves of one another's needs. Become slaves to each other's needs. That's what this self-sacrificial love does. And guys, you don't have to be afraid of giving to her needs, because the way women are wired, when they're filled, they will give. In fact, I have to stop women from over-giving to their husbands. It's like, just receive from him. He needs to know he can put a smile on your face with something small without you having to, flood him with your gratitude gift. Thank you so much for giving to me. Now I'm going to give you this huge gift. That can really kind of make a guy feel like they didn't give so much. So just guys understand that they will give back to you when their needs are met.
Yeah. really, guys, for you to begin to repair a relationship, if you can adopt the approach of, I will meet your needs, even if my own needs go unmet, that will move you further, faster than thinking, no, I need you to meet my needs first. That's where I was getting a lot of things wrong. Going back to John Eldridge and what he said in Wild at Heart, don't go to her for strength, go to her with strength.
Mm-hmm.
And that starts with me taking my needs somewhere else to God first and figuring out what needs of mine even need to be met and whether or not she's going to be able to do that right now.
Right. And if you don't like the way that sounds, Jay's not making it up. That's what love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. That's what that means.
Mm-hmm.
That's what self-sacrifice looks like as a mental thought, as a mental practice.
Yeah.
I will meet her needs even if mine go unmet.
Yeah.
One thing to know is all of Ephesians, all throughout it, talks about the unity of the body, oneness. We are one body. And this is how that's done. And I love how he starts it, submit to one another.
Mm-hmm.
First as wives and husbands, then as with the children, and then masters and slaves, and then the rest of you.
Mm-hmm.
He's working out from the family unit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. If you are having me versus her thoughts
Thinking,
in the relationship, that's a sign that you really need to go back and say, okay, I need to lay my life down, lay down my needs, and just reconnect with her in a different way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Abdication can be an issue here.
Right. So abdication means I voluntarily gave up the throne. Now, as a Christian, God sits on the throne of my heart, or at least he's supposed to. The throne within my family of leading my family, I gave that throne up. I abdicated. I said, I'm going to check out and watch porn and fill myself with entertainment and just let Lori kind of run the show.
Yeah. And when he says throne, he's never, ever come across like he's king here. He's always been very mutual. In fact, he's always been like, no, you do it, kind of thing. So I've never felt like he's been the king of the house.
Right. Again, that prideful, submitting, sacrificing, all of that. But when it comes to what God asks us to do is for men to lead the family, I abdicated that role and I laid it in Lori's lap and said, you know what, I really don't want to deal with it. But then now to ask her to submit after she's been told, look, I need you to run the show, but then I want you to listen to me, that's really ironically unhelpful.
Yeah. So that might be an issue. And we see that a lot. We see abdication a lot. We see just, I don't know if it's just the nature of porn or the nature of entertainment, but we see a lot of instances where the guy has abdicated his role as leader in the home. And then the woman, because somebody's got to lead, she steps in.
Right.
Talking about slaves and masters, I'm not at all promoting or advocating for slavery at all. We're definitely not. I mean, from what we see, just the sex slave trade is just, I think that's going to be the reason Jesus comes back, because there's so many innocent people hurt there that it's just
right
that I think God is going to say, okay, this is enough.
Yeah, I think we've twisted the definitions of those two words to be something really awful that biblically was meant quite differently than what we expect today. So, yeah, we're not advocating for master-slave relationships at all.
Right, and I don't even think the term has been twisted. I think because this passage hasn't been followed in the slave-master role, it was horrible. It was horrible, and that sort of thing is happening today with women in the sex slave trade.
Yeah.
Or even guys in the sex slave trade.
Right. The idea of submission, for you guys, if you want your wives to submit, show them how it's done. Submit to God. Submit to her needs, the needs that she legitimately has that you abdicated from at some point when you were using porn or acting out sexually with other women, she may be able to submit to you then, because she will see somebody different than the person who dropped everything in her lap and said, you know what, I really don't want to be involved in this in whatever way. Either they outright said that, or just through their actions they stepped back from the relationship.
Right. And to the women, how to submit after betrayal. It doesn't mean that you become his sex slave. It doesn't mean that you become his porn substitute. It doesn't mean that you do things that or adopt mentalities like, yeah, porn is okay. Doesn't mean that you adopt those mentalities if that's not the way God is leading you to. It might mean, out of love for your husband, that you submit in other ways, and I don't even know what that would look like, but I do know that when women are submitted to God, so let's say the husband has abdicated his role as leader and he's, wanting to run them off in a ditch, I think then the woman can come over God's leadership to lead the family. And I have heard that, the wife's anger saved the guy. So I'm not saying get angry with him. I'm not saying abuse him verbally. I'm not saying scream at him. I'm saying follow God.
Right.
Because some guys need God to speak through you to them because they're not listening at church. They're not going to church.
Right. Okay, so submission and abdication were our topics for today. If you are struggling in these areas to understand it, please reach out to us. We'd love to have a deeper conversation on it. Again, no offense meant by using the term master and slave. That I know is a real trigger words for some people.
Yeah.
We think that practice is awful and don't advocate for it at all. We do want to say what the word says. So for me to be a slave to Lori's needs, to meet her needs as if she was my master, is a healthy thing.
And for me to do the same thing is a healthy thing as well. And when it becomes that mutual thing, that mutual self-sacrificial thing, it can be a very healing thing after betrayal.
Yes. Yeah. So, guys, for you, you're going to have to sacrifice yourself for this relationship to be healed. And ladies, for you, the submission first begins with your submission to God, because your husband may not be healthy enough to submit to. And there's other verses that talk about by your relationship with God, you can sanctify the marriage. So just be aware of that as well.
But we're not saying stay if God is leading you to.
Absolutely not.
Because some guys won't understand how much this hurts until something drastic like that happens.
Right. Yeah. Anyway, thank you all for listening. We just want to wrap this up by saying again, please reach out to us if you have any questions or thoughts, and we will see you on the next episode.
Bye, guys.
Bye.